And welcome everybody. Let's talk about the Submission Grinder. This is not a paid advertisement of any sort. I just am a huge fan of what they do over there. So I don't know how the Submission Grinder came about or anything like that. I know it is um, hosted by a site called Diabolical Plots, which is a magazine in and of itself. Um, but basically, the purpose of it is to give you a centralized place to find places to submit your stories, maybe to find a market to write a story for. And then it has additional features to it, which I'd like to go over in terms of tracking your own submissions and stuff like that. So you get to the homepage here. It gives you a whole bunch of information about donating and stuff like that. It is a free to use tool, but of course it does rely on some generous donations to keep it running. So um, if you feel the need or want to do that, that's available to you. It gives you some statistics on markets that are currently available on their site. As you can see, there's 2,500 markets out there. And then it gives you some recent activity, including a whole bunch of rejections, which of course is going to be the majority of them, and then a couple of acceptances as they come in each time. Um, then you can look at the recently added markets. This gives you some information about what markets have recently come about. It gives you some information about the genres that they're looking for. These tags over here indicate the length of story. So S is indicating a short story. P is for poetry. C is for a story collection. F is for flash fiction. And then they have like novelette, novella, novel length, stuff like that. And then this far right column is about what kind of market it is, whether it's a paying market, what the pay rate is if they have one, stuff like that. Also gives you some information about whether they're open or closed. Now, this is informational. I very rarely use this particular tab, but my market response list goes over and says, okay, what are the markets that you are currently submitting to, and what are their responses? And you'll see that some of these are bold and some of these are not. The ones that are bold are the ones that have responded, are responses from that market that had a submission date after the submission that you provided there. So I currently have a story out with Augur that I submitted more than 11 days ago, but this 11-day rejection from Augur indicates that they've responded. And you see a whole bunch here, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, 13, and then 11. So I can pretty much guess that mine is 12 days. Uh, but apparently hasn't been picked up yet. So that's great. So I think the most important thing here is the search function. I'm going to concentrate on fiction, but obviously they have a poetry one as well. You can select which genre to submit to. This is a multi-select field, so if you want to select more than one, you can hit fantasy, hold down control, and pick general, stuff like that. Once you have selected at least one, though, there's no way to deselect it. Except I just figured out how. You just have to hit control and then click it again. All right. So we'll figure this out together. So here's the thing. If you are submitting a story that fits into any of these other genres, I'm going to suggest you also highlight literary in general, just because when I was just looking under fantasy, for instance, I wasn't finding a whole lot of markets. But when I added in general and literary, I found a whole bunch of other ones that were listed as general, um, but they had some leanings toward fantasy and stuff like that. Um, the other alternative is to just not select anything at all. It does mean you have to go through the markets that aren't necessarily applicable to you. But we're not talking, I mean, we are talking about thousands of markets, but we're not talking about tens of thousands of markets, right? Um, you can optionally put in your word count. Obviously, if you have a word count for a particular story, that'll enable you to figure out restrict your search to just markets that would accept your particular word count. You can rule out people that are only accepting postal submissions or only accepting electronic submissions, stuff like that. I generally just leave that as any. There's not a whole lot of postal only submissions. The vast majority are electronic, but something to be aware of. You can also restrict by maximum average response time. I wouldn't worry about it. What I have found is that there's a very wide range of response times, and they're not necessarily based in reality. So the only thing to do there is I would just leave this alone. And then you can also have other qualifications, some of these other checkboxes and stuff. Just a quick note about minimum pay. You see that there's an asterisk there. If you put in a 0 here, it'll make sure to only show your paying markets. Since I am looking for paying markets, I frequently do have that. There's nothing wrong with a non-paying market, except I'm interested in getting paid for my work. And then you can obviously put in some search terms. You can, as you get to use this, if you create an account with this site, you can start ignoring particular markets and stuff like that that might not pertain to you. You can exclude markets that have already rejected a particular story that you've submitted, like if you're resubmitting a different story, stuff like that. Or you can exclude markets where you already have pending responses. And that's pretty much it. It's a very robust search. I have not found a thing about this that I would change. There are some markets that have limited demographics, and even though I do not have a way of excluding those from my search, because unfortunately I just don't apply to most of them, I decided that I'm actually most interested in seeing that there are other markets out there. So the search results came up, 253 results that are paying markets for any genre, any word count. This is not every single market in the space, right? So sometimes you might need to find other markets, and I'll go into a little bit later how to add a market to this list. This is sortable. So by default, it sorts by market name. As you can tell, there's a few that are appearing above A just because they're got special characters in them. But the most handy one for me, sorting it by pay rate, and you can see them all sorted down. Now, some of these pay rates are based on a particular word count. So even though 250 cents per word is astronomical in the space, professional pay rate being 8 cents a word, this is probably just for the shortest selection that they allow for flash fiction. And judging from what I'm seeing here, this is an award. It's probably a flat pay. I wouldn't be surprised if it's $250 or something like that. So just something to bear in mind. You see an average response here. You see the genres that are supported by it, and then the lengths that are supported by it. So again, flash fiction, short fiction, novelette, novella, stuff like that. You have average response time. This is not what the publisher gives. This is based on the data that they've actually collected so far on the particular industry. So this is actual data for how long these responses are. I'm going to highlight Clarkesworld here just because they are amazing. They have a really good pay rate for fantasy and science fiction work, and they have a 3-day turnaround. And you know what? That's borne out. I've submitted to them, I don't know, 4 times or something like that, and they've all come back very quickly. This column over here is for the limited demographics. You see there's 3 here right off the top. The first one looks like that's on highlighting in here, but each of them have their own criteria. Inevitably, I don't qualify for any of these, so I'm generally able to just exclude them. But like this one requires Canadian citizens or permanent residents, who have been published in an independent journal but not yet published a book. This one is writers living or working in or around Australia or a particular section of New Zealand. This one is for Canadian citizens and residents in Canada and those who identify as members of the First Nations, Inuit, or Métis peoples. So yeah, there's a whole lot of selection here. Yeah, we'll go into details here in just a moment. So Wiko, you asked, does it give a word count range for flash fiction, short fiction, and stuff? So all of that is contained within the individual entry. So I'll look at one of these entries. I'll actually bring up Clarkesworld as an example. So you'll see this site defines anything that's shorter than 1,000 words as flash fiction, and then anything up to 7,500 words as short story, novelette up to 17,500, and then novella up to, I think novella actually goes up to 40,000. But the idea here is to show you what their actual word count range and what their pay rate is for those ranges. Now this one happens to be the same no matter how long the story is. I will show another one where it varies. So in the individual market, you see a whole bunch of information about what they're looking for, what they are looking for in their story, how long to wait after a rejection, stuff like that. I highly recommend, I mean, in order to submit anywhere, you're going to need to go onto their website anyways. But, you know, before submitting anywhere, do your research on them, take a look at them and stuff like that. Down below, you get some more information about, you know, what kind of submissions they allow, what their estimated response time. This is the response time that the particular site gives, and it may not be based on reality. Now, Clarkesworld, like I said, is excellent about their response times. They've had 2,000 reports just in this system, and their average response time is 3.5 days. That is astounding. And you can see already that there's some pending responses, and they're all over here. So that's great. Yeah, so there's definitely not an industry standard that defines what each of those are. Some people have tried to define it. Flash fiction, you know, I've seen it as high as like 1,500 words or as low as 250 words. But it really just, it depends on the market. You know, ultimately the term for what the length of the story is really irrelevant, right? You really need to look at the length of your story and determine whether it fits within their guidelines. So that's that. Like, this is just the information that you have here. Down below, if you have submissions, like I said, I've got 4 submissions out to them. They all came back rejections, and that's fine. But you'll see, you know, 1 day, 4 days, 1 day, 4 day. You know, there's been plenty of good response times there. To their website, they have this log submission entry, and it's very simple. You just indicate what day you sent it, pick your piece. If you haven't added a piece, you just add the new piece, and it's really quick. And then you save it, and then you can move on with your day. And the reason why you want to track that, aside from being one of these data points that other people are able to benefit from or use, right? It enables you to manage your submissions overall. So you want to, on your count window, you have manage submissions right here. There are certainly other sites out there. I was pointed out about Duotrope, which is not a free site, but it is another option out there. So I was just talking about Submission Grinder just because it came up the other day. All right. So we're on the Manage Submissions page. This is under the Account menu. I'm going to look at just pending response or pending queries. So these are the queries that you personally have sent out. And you'll see like these will default to the oldest ones sent. So it'll be sorted by date sent, and it'll just go down the list. Now, as you can see, I've got a fair few here, 23 tracked currently. These are all different stories. Um, each individual publisher has rules about simultaneous submissions, which is sending the same story out to multiple magazines at the same time. And then also they have some rules about multiple submissions, which is sending out multiple stories to a single site. And that again, you just need to go to the website for the particular publisher and figure out what their rules are. Now, I just did the default search here, which is just looking at my open queries. You can also add in your acceptances, your rewrite requests, your rejections, and stuff like that. And you can also limit it by market, limit it by piece, limit it by date, whatever. They allow you to generate an export file. If you're like me and like to look at data all the time, because I like to look at data, you can do that. Stuff like that. Now, I'm not going into a whole lot of the other features here because, frankly, I haven't even used them. This place is wonderful. But I do want to talk about Contact Us. They have Drop Us a Line, which is just like a Contact Us form, right? And, is what it is. But the more important one is Suggest a Market. And this is very simple. You put the market name in, you put the market website in, done. And the reason why that's important is sometimes you'll find a market that's not on here. And I'm going to highlight my acceptances because this happens to be the one story that's been accepted here. But Tapping Out the Door was accepted by Adventures to Go, which was not a market here. And already I can see that they've been updated in here. But when I first submitted that, I think it was the next day I was able to come in here and put in a response. So if you find a market that doesn't exist in the grinder, just use that form and they'll add it. And then they'll go over and spend the effort to vet it, make sure that it has all the correct information and what have you. And that's great. So I have not used this for poetry. I know it exists. Searching by name, you can look for a particular market by name, and then you can have just the alphabetical listing as well. And that's really all I'm going to say about this. Like I said, this is a great website. I do not get paid for this. I think it just is a great tool to use for short story submissions in particular. And it might be great for other things too, but certainly that. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I am going to clip this out and throw it up on YouTube on my YouTube channel. Hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense once I cut out all the pieces in the middle here. But if you have any questions, drop me a line, leave me a comment, all that fun stuff. All right, thanks everybody. Whew.